Tonight, nickels and dimes, dollars and cents. Saskatoon City Council is trying to find a way to chip away at a $50 million budget shortfall. Also, griefs and calls for action as people come together to remember the woman who died last week at the tent encampment growing outside Regina City Hall. Plus, a quick turnaround for the Riders, who are back to practice after losing in BC, getting ready to head out to Halifax for Touchdown Atlantic.
This is CBC Saskatchewan News.
It is Tuesday, July 25th, and the CBC Saskatchewan News starts right now. Good evening and thanks for joining us. Saskatoon City Council held another special budget meeting today to tackle what could be a $51 million budget shortfall. If nothing is done, homeowners could see a 17% property tax hike next year. As Ashwarya Duda reports, Council rejected some radical changes proposed by one business group.
With a big job ahead, this is the second time councillors have sat down for a special budget meeting. They're getting into the nitty-gritty of what to cut to save money, so they can avoid a projected $51 million funding gap for next year. Decisions made in council today won't come into effect right away. They're an indication for administration as to what should be included in the draft budget, which will be presented to council in November. Then, council will debate it again and make final decisions. As for today, council voted in favor of increasing parking fees by 50 cents an hour.
I'm concerned to know that we haven't changed those rates in well over a decade.
The revenue collected from parking fees is split equally between the Streetscape Reserve and general revenue. Council also voted in favor of increasing the convenience charge when you pay for parking through the mobile app. One councillor voted against it.
It appears to be low-hanging fruit that the administration picked simply to find a dollar amount without enough engagement for the user groups and studies and conversations with the bids for the impact of COVID and the turnover of parking that we're seeing and the struggles that exist within those areas.
North Saskatoon Business Association made several recommendations to council to reduce spending. The major one is to reduce city staffing by 10%, chopping dozens of jobs. It also lobbied for a pause on construction of the downtown arena and the new library. The executive director says, in the past, their recommendations have fallen on deaf ears, and now the city can't catch up.
You've stepped in it big time, and everyone is watching.
None of those recommendations were approved. Instead, the city approved a motion to defer spending on inflationary impacts, which means they won't spend to keep up with inflation when they spend on services such as fire, snow removal, and transit. The money will be added back to the operational budget in 2026. Ashwarya Duda, CBC News, Saskatoon.
Saskatoon police have charged a fourth person connected to a Christian school at the center of a class action lawsuit and numerous allegations of abuse. A 74-year-old elder at Legacy Christian Academy, formerly known as Christian Center Academy, faces charges of sexual assault and assault with a weapon. CBC does not have confirmation on the elder's identity at this time, but the church leader turned themselves into police today. Becky Campbell alleges that the elder sexually and spiritually abused them between the ages of 4 and 8. Campbell came forward to police with allegations about a year ago.
We're really kind of reaching a tipping point in terms of analyzing the harms that can be done by dogmatic and charismatic religious leaders acting with ill intent and bad faith. And I'm really hoping that this kind of contributes to that zeitgeist, I guess, and that we can maybe move socially and culturally toward religion being a positive force as opposed to a destructive force.
The charged church elder is expected to appear in Saskatoon Provincial Court on August 21st. The number of extortion police reports are up in Saskatchewan. RCMP say there were more than 100 in the last 6 months. Police say most of these reports are what's commonly called sextortion, a scam that blackmails people by threatening to share their intimate pictures online unless they pay. A digital media expert says could be a few factors at play in the increase.
Either is that the rates at which it is happening haven't increased that much, but it is being reported more. And certainly there have been a few high-profile cases reported in the news, so people may be more conscious of what extortion is, may be more willing to come forward when they've been victimized. The other thing we have seen a rise in is artificially intelligent generated images being used for sextortion. So essentially, sextortion using a fake image of someone created by AI. And in the United States, there does seem to be an increase in this happening, and so that may be one of the causes as well here.
It's a crime in Canada to share intimate images without consent, regardless of a person's age and how the image was obtained. Johnson says in many cases, the blackmailer will conceal who they are. In recent cases across Canada, around 70% of victims have been teenage boys. On top of being a financial burden, Mounties say it's often an extremely traumatic experience for people. Locally, police data shows June had the fewest overdose deaths reported in Regina compared to any other month this year, but the city is still on pace for its deadliest year. Monthly crime and opioid overdose stats were included in the agenda for today's Board of Police Commissioners meeting. Police reported more than 330 overdoses last month, the most so far this year. Of those, 6 were fatal, the fewest drug poisoning deaths of any month so far this year. Data shows a record 72 people in Regina have died from an overdose through the first 6 months of the year.
It's a huge loss for our city. And I think, the conversation around it is important. And I think the more people that are aware that something needs to be done, I think that that's going to lead us down the path of where we need to go. I think there are there's a need for a lot more services in our community. I don't think that would come as a surprise to anyone in saying that.
The stats also reveal 2 out of 3 overdose victims are men. That said, young women are dying too, and last night the community came together to mourn a mother of 4 who died from an overdose at the homeless encampment at Regina City Hall. Amidst the grief, there were also calls for action. Laura Sharpoletti has that story.
I cannot express what I felt inside for my granddaughter when I saw her when she was born.
A grandmother's devastation and heartbreak pierced the night as people remembered 27-year-old Alyssa Tuckanow at the homeless encampment where she spent the last days of her life. She died of a suspected overdose on July 19th, just outside Regina City Hall.
I love my daughter, my granddaughter. I love them. Your families love you.
Georgina Mace has pleaded with camp residents to listen to those who want to help them. Tuckanow's 4 children stood by, holding pictures of their young mother, while speakers and family spoke of Tuckanow's passion for people.
He just showed everybody love, and that's how my daughter was. She was a kind person, even to her brothers, praying for her brothers all the time and trying to look after them and trying to be the little mama.
Big Knife says her daughter first began drinking at age 12. As the years went by, Tuckanow developed a serious drug addiction. While Big Knife was heartbroken to see her daughter living in the tent encampment, she was grateful for the kindness she received.
The support that they give, not only me, but others around here, that they're not alone, that I'm not alone, that my daughter wasn't alone, that gives me comfort.
Tuckanow's family called for unity, for community and government to join together to find sustainable solutions to help those with addictions.
We need to work with our heart, not policy or mind.
Big Knife hopes some good will come out of the heartbreak.
And I really hope that this is the start of something to help her friends and, her who became her family here.
Despite numerous overdoses at City Hall, Tuckanow was the first person to die at the encampment. Laura Sharpoletti, CBC News, Regina.
While people who are homeless sleep in tents outside City Hall, many social housing units sit empty in the province, and the NDP says That's unacceptable. Opposition leader Carla Beck and housing critic Mira Conway say the vacancy rate in social housing has nearly tripled over the past decade. They obtained documents from the Saskatchewan Housing Corporation through a Freedom of Information request that show nearly 1 in 4 units are empty in Regina. Nearly 700 vacant units. Across the province, more than 3,000 social housing units sat vacant last year. The NDP says people who need those homes are often rejected, while the units fall into disrepair.
There's a lot of people that would want to live in this house. So yeah, fix it up. Find a family that is on the wait list. They're continuing to pay for this unit. The public is continuing to pay for this unit as it is maintained, but it's sitting empty and it's not addressing the housing need.
Regina is not the only city with vacant social housing units last year. In Estevan, 110 units were sitting empty at a 37% vacancy rate. There were also 62 empty units in Meadow Lake for a vacancy rate of 29%. There are 143 vacant units in Battlefords and 159 in Prince Albert. The federal government is giving Saskatchewan just over $20 million over 4 years to end gender-based violence in the province. Federal Minister for Women and Gender Equality and Youth, Marcy Ian, was in Saskatoon today. She met with Saskatchewan's minister responsible for the status of women, Laura Ross. The federal money is part of the National Action Plan to End Gender-Based Violence, a plan focused on increasing prevention, reaching underserved and at-risk populations, and stabilizing the gender-based violence sector. Ian says their goal is an end.
Because you've got to name it. And you've got to say it. You've got to be decisive about it and work towards it to end gender-based violence, removing this barrier to achieving true and lasting gender equality. That is the goal. That's the only goal, to end it. So by continuing to work together, we will build a safer Canada. We are. And I'm pleased that we're starting here on the prairies and in Saskatchewan.
Ian says the money will support the province and its partners to enhance services and to support victims and survivors of gender-based violence and their families. At least a quarter of the money is to be allocated toward increasing prevention efforts. Ian says similar agreements are in the works with other provinces and that Manitoba is close to finalizing one. The Saskatchewan Roughriders are back to practice just ahead of heading to Halifax on Thursday. There, they will take on the Toronto Argonauts in Touchdown Atlantic on Saturday. The team is coming off back-to-back losses. The most recent defeat in Vancouver on Saturday was an ugly game for the offense. The team managed to generate 4 turnovers and landed just 3 Brett Lawther field goals. QB Mason Fine says the team missed opportunities. His play caller vows to make improvements.
I was just disappointed, that we didn't come away with more points. The defense played awesome. Special teams were great. We got all kinds of takeaways with our defense, and so we had good field position. We need to be better, and we will be. The guys are frankly, they're pretty pissed off at the way things came down, and we're going to be better this week.
Football is such a crazy sport because you're like, it's not scoring touchdowns. It's literally just maybe one guy on every single play that maybe not does their job, some small minute detail that stops you from getting a touchdown or getting that one first down, or maybe draws a penalty to not keep that drive going alive.
Fine could have 2 familiar faces back at receiver on Saturday. Both Braden Lenius and Jake Winicky have recovered from injuries and should be back in the lineup in Halifax. Well, you'd never know by how many people who were outside in Saskatoon today that it was uncomfortably warm out there. In fact, it's so hot today that Environment Canada issued a heat warning early this morning. It covers a big portion of west, central, and southern Saskatchewan for today and tomorrow. Ethan will be back with all the details in his forecast after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back. A wildfire in southeastern BC has burned 3 square kilometers of land in less than 24 hours. More than 1,000 properties, including a ski resort west of Invermere, are now under threat. Strong wind is making firefighting difficult in that area and near Cranbrook, about 130 kilometers to the south. There are more than 450 active fires across BC, and more than 260 of them are out of control, most of them caused by lightning. Almost 15,000 square kilometers of land have been burned in this province, BC that is, so far this wildfire season.
This weather update is brought to you by Capital Ford Lincoln. Employee pricing is on now.
And our weather specialist, Ethan Williams, joins me now. With all this heat, you have to wonder when we have to start worrying about fires again.
Yeah, I think for especially in southern Saskatchewan, that could be a concern coming up here. For the north, we're getting enough rain that I think that will be minimized going over these next few days. But it is hot in the south enough that we had 8 temperature records broken. Here's a taste of them, including in Buffalo Narrows, where we were close to 30 degrees yesterday. Maple Creek, our warmest temperature record at 38.7 degrees. Leader East End and Cypress Hills well into the 30s and breaking nearly century-old temperature records in that part of the province. Now, heading through these next few days here, we are looking at temperatures probably diminishing a bit as we go along here. I want to focus on Maple Creek, though, for just 1 second, and we are having a bit of an issue with our computer here right now. It doesn't want to seem to advance my boards that we have. So I'll tell you this, Maple Creek, there has only been 3 other times in the last 30 years that we have actually seen temperatures that got as warm as what we saw yesterday, back in August of 2018. Before that, in July of 2007, a couple of times in July of 2007. So that kind of heat, pretty rare for you for this time of year. We're gonna take a look at our severe thunderstorm watches that we have in effect, and I think Sam maybe will be throwing it back to break here.
Yes, come back to me.
Okay, we're gonna send it back over to Sam. We're gonna figure out what's going on with this computer here. Sam?
Students at the University of Regina left their desks behind today and made the campus their stage. They're part of the Media Arts and Performance Department, and they're taking a unique summer class called City as Performance. In it, students explore the ways in which dance and other forms of movement can be used to investigate the urban environment and as a canvas for creativity. Stay with us. Ethan will have your weather after the break. Saskatchewan has reached a morbid milestone. The latest respiratory illness situation report in Saskatchewan shows 5 more people died from COVID-19 from mid-June to mid-July, and their deaths pushed the overall death toll in Saskatchewan to 2,000 people since March of 2020. In May, the World Health Organization downgraded the COVID-19 pandemic, stating it no longer qualified as a global health emergency. A sweeping set of editorials and analysis papers on Canada's COVID-19 response has been published in the British Medical Journal. The documents call for a closer look at what happened in an effort to avoid a repeat of what some are calling major pandemic failures. Things like the devastation in long-term care homes, vaccine hoarding, and higher death rates in lower-income communities. Christine Birak has the details.
A series of articles in the British Medical Journal did a deep dive into Canada's pandemic response and found while there were successes, especially when compared against other G7 countries, there were also staggering failures. And some of those problems were completely predictable and may have cost thousands of people their lives. The successes were in vaccination rates. Canada hit over 80% vaccinated, and COVID tests were made readily available. But authors say where things really fell apart was the country seemed unprepared for this emergency. Even though a major report done after the SARS outbreak in Canada 20 years ago warned policymakers about a lot of the same issues. One example of the lapses the BMJ articles pointed out was in marginalized communities. Ontario data showed low-income communities faced the highest rates of COVID-19 in virtually every wave of the pandemic. Racialized people, essential workers were hit hardest, and yet vaccines were rolled out in more affluent communities first. Authors also said Canada hoarded vaccines, which prevented lower-income countries from vaccinating their most vulnerable people. But the worst criticisms around Canada's response to the pandemic are about how long-term care was handled.
There had been more than 100 reports sounding an alarm that such a crisis would happen in that setting for a number of different reasons. So this is why the authors call it, a kind of perfect storm that was perfectly forecast and anticipated in advance.
The authors really try to emphasize that this is a moment when change can happen. We've just lost 53,000 Canadians to COVID. Many families have suffered deep losses and lessons need to be learned. Some doctors who are part of Canada's pandemic response support calls for a public inquiry. Others say inquiry or not, governments need to understand what's broken and fix those problems for the long term.
The real issue is sustained funding over time, sustained preparedness over time, and ensuring that these aren't line items that get crossed off on budgets 5 and 10 years from now.
Most doctors acknowledge people are exhausted by the pandemic and want to put it all behind them, but experts insist this is also the right time to act on lessons learned. The goal is to protect people, be prepared, and avoid making the same mistakes in the next pandemic. Christine Burak, CBC News, London.
This weather update is brought to you by Capital Ford Lincoln. Employee pricing is on now.
And our weather specialist, Ethan Williams, is back. Technology is working. Just take it away.
Okay, well, we got a lot to get to, so let's get right into it. We do have heat warnings still in place, likely going to be dropping off overnight tonight as we see a change in the weather. Looking at severe thunderstorms possible in west central Saskatchewan as well as in northern Saskatchewan tonight. And we are seeing a few of those storms firing up right now in the La Ronge and Isle La Crosse areas. Earlier today, some heavier rain to the north of there. This is all thanks to this low pressure system moving in. Warm front bringing in lots of rain to northern sections of the province. And then as we head through the night tonight, this cold front going to be moving through, dropping temperatures into tomorrow, but also bringing the risk of showers and thunderstorms through much of south and central. Rain still falling through the north overnight into Thursday morning. Just how much rain? Well, again, I think these numbers are a little bit overshot, especially in the La Ronge area. That's going to be dependent on if you see thunderstorms there. But by day's end tomorrow, a good 10 to 30 millimeters possible through much of northern Saskatchewan, helping keep that forest fire risk low. Even into east central Saskatchewan, Hudson Bay, Nipawin, Tisdale, maybe 10 to 15 millimeters if we see thunderstorms, some locally higher amounts. And south of that low pressure system, through south and central tomorrow, particularly in southern Saskatchewan, including Regina, we could see some gusts in the 45 to 55 range. And then as that low pressure begins to move out Thursday, we're going to be seeing a reduction in those wind gusts. Let's take a look now at your extended forecast in Regina. Again, breezy tomorrow, but below the 30-degree mark, likely below heat warning criteria. And then temperatures actually decreasing as we head toward the weekend, but definitely more seasonal for this time of year. Saturday may be a chance of storms in there before temperatures rebound heading into the beginning of next week. Keep an eye on those overnight lows. They are also starting to drop as well, making it much more comfortable. In Saskatoon, a markedly cooler forecast over these next few days here, low 20s even. We could see some showers and thunderstorms again, both tomorrow and Thursday. The severe threat pretty low, though, and humidity likely going to be staying low for a lot of south and central as well. So not much of a humidex factor, and then temperatures getting more seasonal as we head back into Saturday and Sunday. Possible showers as we head into Monday and Tuesday, a nice rebound with some sun and cloud there. So, Sam, much more comfortable. We can open up those windows again at night.
Oh my gosh, looking forward to the fresh air. Thanks,
yes,
Ethan.
You bet.
Thank you for hanging in with us through our technical difficulties. That is it for us tonight. For news anytime, you can always head to cbc.ca/sask or subscribe to CBC Saskatchewan's YouTube channel. Ethan and I will be back with more local news and weather at 11. Thanks for watching and have a great night.